Now let's go to rugby league and get some reaction to the sad news today that Maurice Lindsay, the former Wigan Warriors chair and chief executive of the RFL, has died at the age of 81. We can speak to someone that knew him really well. Brian Carney speaks to us now. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, Brian. It's a very sad day. But just tell us about the impact that Maurice had on the game.
Yes, good afternoon, Vicky. It is a day tinged with sadness, but I think it should also be a celebration of the life and the career of Maurice Lindsay, a man who in his formative years was a flyweight boxer around Bolton. He was small in stature, but in our game of rugby league, Maurice Lindsay was a giant, Vicky. He was our P.T. Barnum. He was the man who enthused people to follow the sport, to play the sport, and to take the sport in the proper direction, in a right direction. Now, Maurice made some enemies in doing that. But of course, Maurice didn't worry about that. He thought nothing would ever be achieved by being the same as everybody else. So Maurice made some significant changes to how the game was run, how the game looked, and where you could watch the game. And they're changes that exist to this day and have probably put rugby league in a healthy position, one that it wasn't in at the time Maurice took over.
Yeah, many describe him as a visionary. I mean, that's, I think, what you're alluding to there. He just saw so much more, didn't he, what was ahead of him?
Well, Vicky, he understood that professional sport, particularly professional sport, was an entertainment business, and you had to entertain and enthuse people. And Maurice was very much, as I'll say it again, the P.T. Barnum, the roll up, look here. That was both in his time in charge of Wigan, where he's in his main way of doing it and popularising Wigan, was recruiting really high-profile players and having them gelled into a successful, multiple trophy-winning side that captured the attention of the entire nation. Now, it's a long time since rugby league did that. And then, of course, when he took charge of the game, Vicky, he was to the forefront. Back in the late 80s, at the advent of satellite television, and we're now speaking on Sky Sports News, that Maurice made sure in the early 80s that rugby league was linked to the satellite revolution. And then in the early 90s, of course, he signed exclusive deals with the game and with Sky Sports to show magazine shows, Friday night games. And of course, that transferred into 1995 and the monumental decision to go from Winter Rugby League to Summer Rugby League, of course, which was the dawn of Super League as we now know it. So Maurice was front and centre of that. It wasn't entirely popular at the time, but Maurice, and I think he's been proven to be correct, was that visionary who said, this is the direction the game needs to go if it is to survive. So while he upset some people, Maurice just made sure that it was the right thing for the game to do, in his opinion, and went with it.
Yeah, absolutely. What was he like as a man then? Because like you say, he did have people that went against him. What was he like?
Maurice did not care what the newspapers wrote about him, Vicky, as long as they spelled his name right. He was fearless in that sense. I mean, I think about myself sometimes, and if you might get abused sometimes in a situation, professional situation. For Maurice, it was really like water off a duck's back. He believed in what he was going to do, and again, more often than not, he was proved correct, and he just went with it, and he didn't let the naysayers or the contrarians to his opinion pull him backwards and stop him from doing what he wanted to do. So Maurice was brilliant. Rugby league brought Maurice all around the world. If you spent time in his company, he could tell you stories about his meetings with Nelson Mandela, or how he got Diana Ross over for the opening of the World Cup in 1995, just a year after she had opened up the Football World Cup in America. He did all that. He was a tremendous raconteur, wonderful company, and he'll be much missed by many people, and I will miss Maurice greatly.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet him back when I was a reporter up in the Northwest, you know, when he was, you know, part of the club of Wigan. You know, how much did they owe to Maurice?
Almost everything in their recent history, Vicky, of course. There's great pioneers throughout the history of the game of rugby league. Maurice is another one of those. But the time that Maurice and three other very astute directors took over Wigan, things weren't particularly rosy. Now, they injected the club with cash. They paid some big transfer money to try and bring in some huge names, the likes of Ellery Hanley, Martin Offiah. And they moulded this side together that won so many Challenge Cup trophies and propelled Wigan to the forefront of the sporting conscience in this country. And of course, that just helped rugby league, helped it with its TV deals in later years. So Wigan and the game of rugby league owe a tremendous amount to rugby league, or to Maurice Lindsay. And I think, Vicky, that's reflected in the tributes that have been paid to him already today.
Yeah, I would agree. Just finally then, you mentioned them there, you know, he had that eye, didn't he, for talent, recruiting so many players and even managing the Great Britain team that was on the tours of 1990 and 92, I think. Just how knowledgeable was he?
I think very, Vicky, and that was an acquired knowledge. I don't think when he was growing up as a young fellow, as I said, boxing around Bolton, that rugby league was first in front in his thoughts. But he became a rugby league aficionado. I will tell you though, Vicky, this about Maurice Lindsay: whether he was chairman or whether he was running the game, the players were front and centre. He realised that the players were the superstars. He didn't want average players, he wanted superstars, and he wanted to look after those superstars. I spent some time in Maurice's company just a couple of years ago. He was a really hard worker, like late into his life. And every time he spoke about players, you could see his eyes light up. He had a tremendous relationship with players. And again, he was an enthusiastic leader of men and somebody that people wanted to work for and play for, I believe.
Yeah, a lovely tribute from you. Thank you ever so much, Brian.